Your photos look good, but something just doesn't feel right. Do you think it could be your metering mode? Let me show you how switching to spot metering could be the missing piece that finally makes your images pop, just the way you or your clients imagined it. We are going to get in depth with spot metering in this video. Let's make your images look exactly how you want them. But before I show you the 3 simple steps on how to use spot metering, you need to know what your camera thinks is medium gray. Once you figure that out, you'll know how to speak your camera's language. I got a shot. I think I got something. Or better yet, tell your camera what you need instead of the camera telling you what it thinks is right. So I'm going to give this to you in 3 simple steps. Step number 1, you are going to change some settings in your camera. Step number 2 is you're going to figure out what your camera thinks is medium gray. And step number 3, I will explain to you exactly how I use spot metering for my images. So step number 1 is to change some settings in your camera. I just want you guys to know this practice is to figure out what is the medium gray. These settings are not going to be set in stone. Of course, you're going to change them as long as you know what the medium gray is. Go to your settings in your camera, go where you have your exposure, and from the exposure you are going to choose increments of 1/3 or 1/2 or entire stop. I personally use 1/3 simply because it just helps me refine my exposure better. And the other thing is I'm so used to just 3 clicks equals to 1 stop, right? So 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. 3 clicks to the right, I'm increasing my exposure. 3 clicks to the left, I'm decreasing my exposure. 3 clicks to the top, I'm increasing it. 3 clicks to the bottom, I'm decreasing it. Basically, shutter speed and aperture. That's how I go. But if you do half a stop, then it's half a stop, meaning 1 click, half stop up, 2 clicks, the whole stop. The reason why I'm speaking in clicks and not in f-stop and shutter speed is because when you're looking to the viewfinder, you are just clicking away, right? You don't have time to go see what you're doing. So 1 click, 1/3 up, 1 click, 1/3 up, 1 click, 1/3 up. That equates to 1 stop higher, or 1 click, 1 click, 1 click. 3 clicks down is 1 stop. So that's how I use it. You can use it the way you want to use it. That has nothing to do with spot metering. I'm just trying to show you what I do. Number 2, you are going to take your ISO to whatever your camera manufacturer is saying is native. That's what you take it to. In my case, I believe it's 640. And the third one on the camera settings you will change is you will take your mode to manual, because we're going to come up with a number 4 medium gray. This is just for the test to determine the gray your camera is seeing. Point number 3 is going to clarify everything that you are understanding in this video, and that you will be able to use spot metering like a pro. Step number 2. You are going to go outside on a sunny day, anywhere in between 11 o'clock to 3 o'clock. You're going to put a 50mm lens or an 85mm lens. You're going to have the sun behind you. Now you take your camera, look up to the sky. Mind you, only blue sky. You will not include any clouds in there. And then you will press your exposure button and turn your shutter speed or your aperture until it hits 0. Once it hits 0 while you're pointing it up to the sky, that is your measurement for your camera's medium gray. ISO is going to be whatever your native ISO is. What I'm trying to say to you is if ISO is 640 and you point it up and you have moved your shutter up and you have moved your aperture down so it hits 0, that is your medium gray, meaning it could be 5.6 at 1200 of a second. 640, 5.6, 1200 of a second. Now that is your medium gray. Now mind you, I'm just throwing these numbers out. Your medium gray could be totally different than my medium gray. Your camera could see medium gray differently than my camera sees medium gray. Now take that number, write it down or memorize it. From here, let's go to step number 3. What I do and what you can do on location to use the spot metering correctly. So just so you guys know, don't get hung up on the numbers. The numbers could be very different with different cameras. Now we've kind of finished the technical aspects here, but I just want to go over the fundamentals of spot metering. At least those are the fundamentals for me. Spot metering is basically the old-fashioned way of dodge and burn. When you were dodging and burning in your dark room, you were taking film and passing chemicals through it in a way where you wanted it to burn a little bit more, meaning make it lighter. You were dodging it with the chemicals. Spot metering does almost the same thing. I go and I measure my swan, and then I go and I measure the background, and then I go and measure the other side of the background. The camera is thinking medium gray, and I'm saying I don't want it to be medium gray, so I'm going to make it brighter. I pulled it up by stop and a half. What it's doing to my background, my foreground, is it's making it brighter than my trumpeter swan. So in this image, everything is brighter or the same, hence everybody's looking exactly where I want them to look. Dodge and burn does that. So does spot metering. Alright guys, so now look at this image of a horse. What did I do? I took my spot meter and I measured my horse. And I know that the camera wants to make it gray, but it's a white horse. So I open it up. Then I go and I measure my background. The background is all snowy, so I want my viewer to look exactly at the horse. So why don't I burn it out a little bit? So I don't care about my background in this case and the case before. I only care about my subject. And I know that if I do the medium gray, it's going to make my horse darker. So I'll move up my exposure knowing that the background's going to get blown out a little bit, which is what I really want. And the reason why I want that is so I can direct my viewer's eye straight to the horse. Now let's look at an example of exactly the opposite. In these two cases, I've given you that my subjects are darker than the background. And the only way I could determine that is by spot metering in the background and then saying to myself, I'm going to blow out the background. The trumpeter swan is also white, but I want this trumpeter swan to be the darkest. So the eye goes there. Same thing with the horse. I want to blow out the background so everybody looks at my horse. The horse is the darkest in my frame. I am determining that, not the camera. The camera is basically making everything gray so that the foreground is also good. So is the horse, but the horse becomes darker. And I don't want that. If I were to listen to the camera, the foreground and the horse would kind of get blended together. That's why I did spot metering to the background, kept it brighter than the horse. Now everybody's looking at the horse. In this image of the flamingo, life was a little bit easier because if you see the background in the water is almost medium gray in any case. If I expose the water with the spot meter and that was hitting medium gray, then that's all I needed to do. Medium gray, because I know that the flamingo has some whitish feathers in it and it's going to pop. So everything else is going to be darker. The flamingo is the lightest. Eyes go directly to that. Now that is achieved only with spot metering. I could spot meter the background, I could spot meter the flamingo, and I say there's a difference between the background and the flamingo, but I am okay with it because I want my flamingo to be the brightest in the frame. So hence your eyes travel there all the time. You measure different places and you say my main subject is darker than everything else, or my main subject is lighter. And if it is not, then you move yourself in a position where your subject will be lighter or brighter because your subject is not there. Your background and your foreground is always going to be there. So you measure all of those first and you say, you know what? I am going to photograph a white horse. So if I place myself in this position where everything else is going to be darker, everybody is going to look at the horse. And how dark do I want it? That is something that you will spot meter and say, my horse is going to be at XYZ and my background is going to be at XYZ. Great. Now everyone's going to focus to the horse because everything else is darker. Horse is the brightest. I'm going to give you guys one last example. Now look at this. For some reason, the bald eagle flew where I was standing and it sat on a branch. Everything behind the bald eagle was white. I'm saying to myself, white with the bald eagle's head being white, I'm dead meat. I'm not going to get anything. And then I spotted a spot in between trees, which wasn't dark, mind you, but it was so far behind that if I shift myself a little bit, I could place the bald eagle's head right in the middle of it. It was so far away, but it was darker because it had trees and stuff. So what I did was I spot metered the background and then I spot metered the bald eagle. The bald eagle just sat over there. The difference between the bald eagle's head and the background was at least 2.5 to 3 stops, and that's why if you see my background has become so dark and my bald eagle is exposed, these feathers are exposed so properly that you can see every single detail. I would never be able to figure out what the real measurement is if I wasn't spot metering, and I would never be able to direct the people's eyes to the bald eagle if I wasn't spot metering. I would never be able to tell that the background is so much darker if I was not spot metering, because your eye is not seeing the dark background, right? Your eye just, everything is white, it's snowing, everything is fine, but it was darker because it was in between the trees. So all I had to do was move it, landed the shot. This is my last tip to you guys before you go on a shoot, is to know what your camera thinks is medium gray, number one, and number two, know what your animal falls in the medium gray scale. Those two things will get you guys amazing photographs. I'll speak to you soon. Thank you.